that you document, and then when you address it, you move to another space, and then you talk about something else. And it's always a moving target. You guys are never fixed for a specific amount of time to address something, because when we want to address it, you've moved on, or we don't do that any longer. Now we're doing this. And it sounds like that it's a continuing effort of trying to hit a moving target, which is very difficult. With your ongoing meetings, your changes and updates and modifying this agreement. Why are we spending all this time now if it's subject to something else 12 months from now?
Let me clarify. I guess the point of the ongoing look at it isn't to change it just because we want to change it. It's to see if it's relevant, if it's working, if it's what the community needs. The purposes of these meetings are to get us to that concrete place, to say, these are the things that are important to us as a community, these are the things we want included in the agreement. So that's where we're going. We haven't got there yet. That's where we're going with these meetings.
And part of what we found out through the last discussion, the meeting that we had back in February, is that there were a lot of topics that were brought up. There were a ton of different topics that came up through the conversation. And to your point, we don't want this to be a moving target conversation, right? There are issues that need to be addressed, and the issues in and of themselves are so heavy, you can't get through 10 of them in one night. So you have to start with some of the comments and concerns that were raised and saying, okay, so one of the major concerns was raised was around the population. Who are the individuals that will actually be served? What are their characteristics? What are the challenges they face? What happens when they're out at night? I mean, these comments came out of the last meeting, so that's just one topic.
We discussed that. I was here last time. That wasn't an ongoing topic. That was discussed.
Well, I'll speak for the private conversations and some of the follow-up conversations. Individuals wanted more information. They wanted to better understand the population. There are many topics that have to be addressed before a good neighbor agreement will actually come to fruition. And to your point, again, we don't want it to be a moving target conversation where it's just fluctuating from time to time. But that's why we're having these meetings monthly until the neighborhood says we don't want the meetings anymore or we've had enough meetings. Please. Please.
First of all, I want to acknowledge the panel and acknowledge the very difficult work you do and the very valued work you do. Thank you. Because there is a very real need for the services that you provide, and I want to say thank you for doing that. There has never been a question in my mind as to whether or not this is a need in our community, in our city, in our nation. So that we can put aside, and that's why I was getting impatient, because I was hearing you trying to convince us about what you do. There is no question about that. We've also said there is no question about what we have seen, what we have read, and what we have seen as we have gone to Columbus to look at the facilities that NCR manages. That is not the issue. The issue is about locating that kind of a facility on Alaska Avenue in the midst of a residential neighborhood. It's an experiment, and we don't like being subjected as subjects in an experiment to which we did not consent. So I'll set that aside and get back to the neighborhood, good neighbor agreement. And now here's a real big concern I have. I read documents that indicate, and one of the panelists mentioned, that this good neighbor agreement would be agreed to and signed by those who represent the leadership of our community. And I understand in reading documents that the leadership of our community has already been in negotiation with NCR around community benefits. And what I'd like to do is hear where you are with that, what kind of things you have already been negotiating on our behalf that we didn't know about, and I can say what those are because I read them, and I just want to know where you are on them. According to the documents that I've read, our community leadership has been in negotiation with NCR to, one, reduce the number of units in the building from 99 as it was originally proposed to 75. That was the first point. The second point was to create a $30,000 per year grant for the residents of Alaska Avenue to be renewed for a 10-year period. For the Avondale Youth Council to be given $10,000 in scholarship funds for the next 10 years. And for there to be some agreement as to the construction workers and other workers in the facility and how they would come from our community. Now that's what I've read that has been in negotiation between the leadership of the Avondale community and NCR. So my question is, on what basis were those points identified and being negotiated on the part of the residents who knew nothing about it? And where are you with that negotiation?
So I want to make sure I'm clear. So there are points that are currently being negotiated between National Church Residences and the Avondale Community Leadership, Community Council, whoever those folks would be that are currently existing. And you're asking, where is the conversation now as it relates to these negotiations?
I have two questions.
Is that the first one?
What is the basis for coming up with those points of negotiation on behalf of the residents with no input from the residents? And two, what is the status of those negotiations?
I got you that.
Oh,
First of all, on every development project, we always ask for something for the community. And those emails were back a year ago, and since that
It
time.
was May 2nd, 2013.
A year ago, and since that time, nothing has happened with those requests. They're just kind of sitting there. Because the Good Neighbor Agreement was to be worked on back when those conversations were happening. Those are things that we put on the table. And since the Good Neighbor Agreement wasn't worked on, those requests were just there also.
How did you
We
come up
always-
with those requests though?
Our goal is always to see improvements on the street, and we always ask for something for the youth council, for developers.
Since it's our street, do you
But you would have been involved in the Good Neighbor Agreement. That's something we put forth. It wasn't decided. We asked for it.
And NCR said, yuck. Are they trying to buy, are the residents trying to buy our support? And that was an affront to me.
But I didn't see that
Because
email.
go ahead. What NCR responded was, yuck, ugh, UGH.
So
I
I
have
have some
you pronounce that.
responses to that.
And said, are the residents trying to buy our support? And the answer to that question, I will say to NCR, is no, we are not. We are not selling our support. We are not interested in having the development on our street. And it has nothing to do with our desire not to help those less fortunate. That is a part of who we are. The issue that we have, and you talk about data, a piece of data that I would put out, you already said our neighborhood is 40% of our residents living at or below the poverty level. There are numerous studies that document that further concentrating poverty in an already impoverished neighborhood has more negative impact on children in that environment than if those children were born to mothers addicted to crack cocaine. That's serious. That is serious. So while we talk about reaching out and helping other people, we are not opposed to that. But what we are opposed to is further concentrating poverty in our neighborhood. And when we say no to it, what we are profiled as is some kind of unfeeling people who don't want to reach out and help other people. But what we're saying is that there are 52 neighborhoods in Cincinnati, and that every neighborhood owns a piece of this problem, and that Avondale should not be the solution for every problem that is happening in this city. That's what we're saying. It has nothing to do with not wanting to help people. It's about protecting the integrity of our neighborhood and trying to revitalize and not reaching out to pull in more problems, but dealing with the problems that we have already.
Can we talk about that for a second? You talked about bringing in problems, and I believe there's someone here who may kind of have some insight or information as it relates to employment services, right? Because I think one of the things, and this came out of the last conversation, folks had said to me, how many individuals are employed? Tell me about the services. What happens if the folks who live in this community?
That's not what we're
We're
talking
not
about.
talking about that.
No, wait a second.
You're trying to advocate for their health. You haven't said one thing. Nobody said one thing. Somebody came up a day late and a dollar short when we're addressing critical needs of people's health that live here now. You're putting the volcano on top of the mudslide.
That's not what I'm
You
trying
are.
to do. So
You
let
are.
me be
You
clear.
all are trying to do it. That's
Let
what
me be
you're
clear
supporting.
then. I apologize for interrupting, but let me be clear then. One of the questions, I'll state it a little differently, that came out was around the individuals. We brought a panel here tonight to talk about the individuals who will be living on site here. An individual asked about, because we talked about bringing more problems in. Was that the correct statement? That we're bringing more problems into a community that's already has problems?
Yes.
Let me just clarify.
Yes, you are.
Because I think you just hit on a very relevant point. And back to Tommy's point about moving targets. We continue to deal with moving targets. When we initially had a conversation with NCR on February 11th of 2013, we asked specific questions about the residents who would be targeted for this facility. And we were told things that were inconsistent with what we found out once we got a copy of what they told OFA to get $12 million in tax credits. So we read that and we understand the target profile. That's in place for several months. Now we read the target profile that is being communicated to CMHA to get vouchers for the rent on this property, and that's different. And then we read what is going to be the composition of services as they're going to look at how we get the zoning right to build this thing, and that's different. So don't tell us there isn't a moving target when we are reading documents that are being submitted to different entities, and the composition is being twisted just a little bit to fit in with that agency, and twisted just a little bit more to fit in with that agency, and twisted just a little bit more to make sure you get the zoning. So how in the world can we sit here and talk about good neighbors when we can't even depend on what you're saying from one day to the next?
So what you're saying is consistent with what I was trying to put forward. We're talking about the profile, and you're mentioning that there have been changes in the description of the profile. So is there someone who from National Presence that would like to actually talk about the profile of the individuals, why the information looks different in maybe the OFA application versus the CMHA application?
And the zoning application.
And the zoning
Every
application?
time there is an application, it looks different.
Any answer?
Well, one reason for the difference is the way that organization defines area. One group, like Housing Authority says high needs and special needs, and that's not what OFA says, that's not what we say. So we have to use it and incorporate.
Well, let me help you, Amy, because I just happened to write it down. As defined in OFA, the population will be 85% of people will have moderate to severe mental illness. Same thing for CMHA. Substance abuse, 50% of people, according to your application to OFA, will have substance abuse issues. According to your application to CMHA, that number is 30%. Dual diagnosis, 30%. Disabilities to OFA is 10%. To CMHA is 15%. To the zoning commission, it's we won't have people who are in the criminal justice system. We will not have people who are substance abusers. But to OFA you said you would to get $12 million. To CMHA you said you would to get vouchers. But because those things are not allowed on that property to allow for zoning, you say you won't. So I don't understand. I don't understand. And this is written down, so this isn't a matter of calling a substance abuser a drug abuser on one application. So substance, drugs, that is not it. That is changing the characteristics of the composition to fit in with what's needed at the time. And they're different. But if I'm interpreting it wrong, I am happy to be in error. So tell me how 50 on one page becomes 30 on another, becomes 0 on another. I don't get that.
No, I think Amy should ask the question.
Oh,
I don't have a copy. I do have that copy.
I'm sure you're familiar with the data, since you all writing it.
I wanted to look at what it said.
I just told you.
Well, it says alcohol or substance abuse history. It doesn't say current. So,
Alcohol or history, what?
alcohol or substance abuse history. So
Okay.
it's not about someone being, that's correct. It's not about, the zoning is correct. It's not about someone being a current substance abuse user. OFA is correct, CMHA is correct. It's about the person having alcohol or substance abuse history. And the percentages have been adjusted. Those applications are a year apart. 2 applications, a year apart. We've had time to work with the continuum and understand the population a little more.
And the zoning application, the recertification was responded to on February 19th. The application to CMHA went in on January 16th, roughly a month apart, and those are different. And to your point about the substance abuse, you said no to that. Well, your services for OFA say that you are seeking accreditation to provide case management for recovering drugs and alcohol addicts, that you are looking for a case manager with that certification. And in CMHA, you said you're not going to do that. And then in the zoning, you say, we're not even dealing with alcohol and rehabilitation services. So it's just too many inconsistencies that are on paper. And when we see those and you come in here and double talk, and then you say we want to be a good neighbor, it makes it real difficult for me. I'm just saying.
Well, once again, the OFA application was over a year ago, and we've had time to talk to the Cincinnati Zoning Department, talk with the Housing Authority, and adjust the project.
So now are you saying that what you told OFA to get $12 million isn't true anymore?
And we've let them know that too.
And they're okay with that?
Yes, we actually have a letter, we have a copy of it actually, that we wrote to OFA explaining our changes.
And your changes are, tell us today what those are so we'll kind of know where the target is today.
So we told them about going down in number of units from 99 to 90. We told them about reducing occupancy from making everybody would have a single occupant. And we went into further detail explaining that we will not be focusing on substance abuse issues or for reincarceration issues.
But you never told them you were going to focus on substance abuse. You never told them that. That was going to be a part of it. Now you're taking it out completely, and you're taking out criminal offenses completely.
No.
And
Some
you're
of them have a
you're
history
saying,
of those things.
you're saying in the zoning application that you will not do anything around substance abuse, and you will not be dealing with anybody who's a part of the criminal justice system. And I submit that the reason you took those out is so you can shoehorn yourself into being legitimate with the zoning code. Because those things are permitted under transitional housing, which your lawyer has sent me a very flaming letter saying you are not. Accusing us of claiming you are when the city says that's what you are.
The
So-
city does say we are.
I don't get it.
You know,
I don't get it.
Can you provide a copy? Wait a second, we have a
No,
gentleman
HUD does
waiting
not.
back patiently here. Can you
HUD does
provide a
not.
copy of the letter?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to do it right now, but just, we want to make sure that we bring it up so we can see the current changes as they exist and to make sure that it's clear on who will actually be serviced in this development. Yes, sir.
My question is to the moderator and to the process. Number one, if we want to have a debate about the project, then label it as a debate about the project, whether you for it or against it. I don't, that's, but if you're going to respect the opposition, that's fine. But the point of this meeting, as it's been identified, is to talk about a good neighbor agreement, and if that's not what you're able to make sure that the opposition respects the process as well. And so my point is not whether I'm for it or against it, but to begin to, because the issues of substance abuse and the issues of whether what NCR did and those kind of things, that can be at Avondale 29. They can hold their own forum, and I would be glad to come and hear the legitimacy of their argument. But I don't know, and I don't want to keep coming to these meetings. I want to see what a good neighbor agreement is about, and maybe the focus of these meetings should be about having a good neighbor agreement. Now, whether there's all kind of time for, because the opposition ain't gonna change, and those who are for ain't gonna change at this point in time. It is what it is. But that's one point. My second point is that we elect leadership to come up. We elect leadership because leadership is skilled. They have some expertise, and we expect leadership to act in our best interest at times and to come up with ideas on our behalf. Leadership should not always have to be subject to going back and checking it, because if you have to do that, then you're not expert at leadership. When you come up with some good ideas before they become cemented, the proper thing to do is to bring it back to the base before it gets cemented. So those are my comments. Because if you're not going to begin to focus on a good neighbor agreement, if this is going to be a forum for the pros and cons of the project, then those of us who are coming, you know what I'm saying, I'm a single father with 3 kids, my daughter's right here, then now my time is being wasted. So there are those who, whether it's pro or con, I want to see what a good neighbor agreement looks like. I want to know, is a good neighbor agreement a binding contract? I want to be able to answer the gentleman's question. If a good neighbor, if something isn't done on that, how is that rectified? What are the real consequences of NCR if they renege on a good neighbor agreement? Those should be the focus of a good neighbor agreement forum, not to debate the project. Well, if we want to have, or you can change the title. So that's all I'm saying.
No, thank you. And you actually hit on a number of items there. So let's take 2 steps back a little bit. So we know that this project, in terms of conversations, engagement, grant application, and so forth, it's been going on for a while, right? But one of the criticisms that came out, I would say, since I've at least been engaged since September, is that people were not heard, right? And so, I'm gonna get to your point. So give me a second here. That people were not being heard, that the community who lived on Alaska Avenue had not had a chance to voice their opinion publicly in the community. Yes, at city council, yes, possibly at some local council meetings, but they had not had a chance to get their voice out there. So when this good neighbor agreement process started, National Church residents agreed and said, yes, we're willing to come in and listen. Even though we may have heard some of the challenges before, we're committed to the people and we're committed to the process. Now, I'm not making this up. I'm not standing here in this church lying. What I'm telling you is what they said to me. Because you're right, it doesn't make sense for them to come in here, take abuse, to sit back and take the type of criticism that they're taking, knowing that they're going to steamroll the project anyway. It just doesn't add up. It's a waste of time for all of us involved. I walk away from the project because I don't like to waste my time either. So there is a process of getting to an agreement. I've had many, many candid conversations with Linda, help me if I'm wrong here, who has said, we're not ready for an agreement yet. Right? There are things that have to be discussed before we can get to an agreement.
Right, the opposition isn't ready for an agreement, but there are some residents who are for it. I'm not saying I'm one of them, but I'm just saying there are.
So I'm hired. My role, my job is to move forward with as much support as possible. And if
Right.
it turns out that this fine line will not be broken and the individuals on either side will not cross over to meet in the middle, so be it. But we will respect the process and walk through it. That's why we transitioned
It's
from
not
a
a good
very
neighbor
open,
agreement.
just give me a second. That's why we transitioned from a very open forum last week. Those who were here, from what I was told, did not feel like they were interrupted. I felt that individuals got their voices out there. They shared with passion. We didn't temper the meeting at all. But we structured this room to make sure the individuals are heard, and we'll get there. I believe, I'm very confident that we will get there.
Okay.
Over here to the back. As a property owner on Alaska Avenue, I think that getting or asking the tough questions are important. There's no way in the world we're going to ever be able to come to any kind of agreement with all of these questions, all of these things that are going on that we as a community don't understand, especially, and it just continues to ring out in my heart, how this project has been going on for so long and the residences of the street, including what we just recently learned, negotiation about $30,000 per year and all that, all of these talks that are going on without our inclusion, okay? So, I mean, there's no way that we can have any kind of agreement until we get all of what's been going on cleared up, okay? That's point one. I may have misunderstood something you said, I'm not sure. Yes, we're not here to be disrespectful to the panel, leadership, NCR, but at the same time, we don't necessarily feel like we should be disrespected either. We've been through so much already as a result of them making decisions about not only our street, but our lives, all right? And how all of these plans are good for everyone else, including the occupants, but not necessarily the neighbors who are going to be affected by this. Certain things I just simply, with all due respect, don't believe. I don't believe, I can't remember what your name is. You went through all these studies to say that this is not going to affect property value, that this is not going to affect this. I just simply don't believe it, because the only ones that seem to speak highly of this project are all of those that seem to have a vested interest in it outside of the residents. You bring this project up to any average person and they feel just like we do. What? I can't believe it. I talked to people who had come to visit me from St. Louis, don't know nothing about Cincinnati, told them about Avondale, Alaska, from what I know about it, what's been brought out, and they couldn't believe it. And I didn't say anything inaccurate to them at all right? All of the information that has been conveyed to everyone as members of Avondale 29 have been very accurate and to the point. Everything that Ms. Linda Thomas stated tonight was what was on NCR's documents to each of these organizations. And if it's viewed that they're being attacked based on what they wrote, then I think we really have a problem here. The only thing we're doing is saying here, this is what you're saying. You said this to this organization. You said this here. You say this on your brochures. You said this to us. What is the real deal? And we have a right to know this as residents, as property owners. We have a right to know this. And me personally, I'm gonna sit down. I think it's it bothers me that people can come from the outside, come from outside the city, who don't live on the street, have a vested interest on the street, and tell us what's good for us. What's gonna be good for you. It is so offensive to me. You're gonna get a big old beautiful building. Right now, the OFA application that says it's gonna be 80%, if I'm correct, 85%, because I'm not gonna say anything inaccurate, mildly to severely mentally disabled, which could mean anything. And we hear daycares, you're across the street from schools. I just pulled up in this parking lot and looked at their playground back there, and it's just steps away from where this property will be.
And
We have a right to be concerned here.
right, and one of the reasons why this church, and Pastor Tate, correct me if I speak out of turn here, but one of the reasons why this church, who has a parking lot and a playground that backs up to the future facility, is in support of it, is because of the mission. It's because of the individuals, because I just, and again, Pastor Tate, you correct me if I'm wrong, I can't see a pastor willingly wanting to put individual in harm's way, right? And maybe I'm looking at this through the wrong lens here, but the organizations who are in support of it, and someone asked a question about, you know, is there any kickbacks to the organizations? Are there any on the panel? Are you guys getting paid for this? Are there future contracts, you know, out there that are causing you to come in? Because you're right, that would present a bias. I totally get the understanding where you're coming from, but there are individuals who are connected to this project who will not get a kickback. Individuals who really do believe in serving and supporting the
So there are
population.
individuals who won't be affected by it one way or another, but you have a whole street and a whole area in this community that will be, regardless. And you left us out, and you continue to move your target left and right, and we don't want to come in here as residents or property owners and feel like we can't ask questions. I was personally offended when I walked in here today and the way I understood it, we had to put our questions down on cards. No, I don't believe that there should be the only ones that be able to talk. The community and the residents and property owners should be able to talk as well. So, I mean.
So an individual earlier raised the question about the process, right? And what we had last month when we had the meeting is we had a process where individuals came up after the meeting and said, I didn't get a chance to talk, right? I didn't get my opinion out there. I didn't get my voice out there. So this was an attempt to make sure anybody who had a burning question, or just a question in general, for the panelists that we brought here, would get their questions out there and answered. We did not say we would not do an open discussion. We did not say we would mute anybody. And for those who have been speaking, I hope you feel that we've been very fair in allowing you to get your points across in a way where everybody can hear you. But moving forward, we are not going to continue to dwell on the past. We're going to build on the future. So what we're going to do is we're going to address the comments and concerns that are being raised. We're going to bring in more experts. They're going to be from within the community. They may be on Alaska Avenue. They can be from anywhere within a neighborhood. They don't all have to be from Columbus or anywhere else to address the comments and the concerns you all are raising. That's not something anyone's against. And eventually, the goal is to work towards a good neighbor agreement. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say again that I want to make it very clear that the issue that I personally am having with ever trying to get to an agreement, a good neighbor agreement, is I don't know who I'm agreeing with. Am I agreeing with the NCR that applied to OFA? Am I agreeing with the NCR that applied to CMHA? Am I agreeing with the NCR that applied to get a zoning compliance certificate? That's my issue. So if you come in here at the beginning of every meeting and say, the NCR you're interfacing with today is the OFA NCR, then I know how to react. But we got some schizophrenia going on here.
What you're asking for clarity is clarity. You're saying.
I'm asking for consistency, transparency, and truth. That's what I'm asking for.
I just want to be very, very clear, because I know that there are concerns with residents as it relates to the Church of the Living God, even my own members. We service community. We service this community. We have been serving this community for years. There are people who are mentally ill that attend my services every Sunday that live right next door. They have the privilege, because that's a halfway house. So they have the privilege of coming and going when they please. And I service them every week. I come in here, I hug on them, I love on them every week. When this building here was drug infested behind me, when this building down here, they didn't know how they were going to pay the bills. My church got involved and we got the water turned back on. We got the lights turned back on. And their landlord lived in New York. So we've been servicing the community for years. And that's all we're doing. We want to take care of Avondale. And we support whatever is going on in Avondale for the betterment of Avondale. This initiative and this project has its own agenda. The people that they're talking about servicing are people we're servicing already. I have 6 members here. 2 who just got out of prison and have mental illnesses. And I don't have the privilege of turning them away. If they want to come here and worship, they want me to be their friend, they want me to help them, that's my responsibility as a man of God. So I don't have the privilege to choose sides or to choose agendas. If NCR is going to ask for my help to service the people that they're going to serve, I'm responsible in some way or another to God and to this community to make sure that this church, which is for the community, if anybody in this community wants to have a meeting here, they've had the privilege of having a meeting here. We've had funerals for gangsters, for kids who didn't have churches. We have community meetings for children's initiatives. Everything goes on here. So it's been viewed that because we're hosting the meeting, that we're in bed, and that's the term that I've heard, we're in bed with NCR. I don't have that privilege. I don't have the privilege to close my doors to anybody. So the Church of the Living God is a community place. It's a community-centered area. So everything that happens here ultimately becomes a betterment for our community. And this is a neutral zone for building agreement and relationships. Now, how it's done, that's between NCR and the residents. But our commitment is to the Avondale community, has been and will always be.
And with that said, Pastor Tate, it's 7:30 and I'm committed to being a good steward of time. Would you mind closing down prayer?
Sure.